I think what we're seeing is this transformation to more of a life of intention.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story. I've become conscious lately of how deliberate we've been becoming. And by we, I mean just in my house, talking to my wife and sons, how deliberate we've been about what businesses we start to go to. So the most dramatic example are the takeout restaurants. And what I mean by that is if I suggested to Nikki that we get takeout and I mentioned a large chain, she's going to automatically be pretty unenthusiastic. What she wants and what I find I want are the much smaller businesses, the mom and pop shops. Maybe they have one outlet, two outlets at most. And the thinking is, at least, the way we've talked about it, is that, well, I tend to think that the smaller businesses, the local community businesses, are going to be a lot more diligent about doing as much deep cleaning as they can and making everything safe.
Well, that's so funny.
Making sure that all their processes are in line and keeping their employees safe. So I've noticed in the conversations, not only with Nikki, but myself as well, I have much more of a bias toward the smaller locally owned businesses than I had before. Now, that's not to say that there aren't certain knee-jerk reactions, like I will order from Amazon or Zappos, or, when I need something technology-wise, I think, Best Buy will have that or whatever. But a lot of the shopping that we've done, a lot of the businesses that we've frequented have been really the smaller shops. And I know that I'm not alone in that. I've talked to a number of people. And my point is this. As you look toward a post-COVID world, and particularly in retail and food, I'm wondering whether the trend is going to be toward more of what I think of the English village version of shopping, where you have the flower shop and you have the butcher and you have
the opposite of one-stop shopping.
Yeah. So
the 42-stop shopping.
America has really been, let's get a superstore, and I can't wait till we get a Target, and I can't wait till we have all this. And that's fine for a lot of things. But I think now there's been such an emphasis, and there's going to be a continued emphasis on small, local, where your neighbors type enterprises. And I was wondering if you had felt that or seen that.
So yes, but interestingly, which just supports the fact that whenever I see more than one person come to a same conclusion from different points of view, I mean, for different reasons, it just reinforces that is probably a destination that is more likely to be headed towards, because there's multiple reasons for that. So I have also erred towards, or not erred towards, but, moved, I tend to choose more local places, which has always been an interest of mine, but not always when it comes to getting takeout. Actually, not with takeout. Like it'll be the thing that when I'm going to a restaurant, but I didn't typically go get takeout from those places. Anyway, I did it. I've been thinking of it more from supporting these places so that they exist on the other side of this happening. I'm less concerned from a cleanliness standpoint. Not that I don't care about that, but it just hasn't been my main motivation. It is also interesting that I think there's so many reasons that we're making some of these choices. I mean, to your point, it's not like there's a local aux cord creator, the guy who's making USB cables, artisan USB cables.
And you're not going to go to Bob's Computers, to pick up his own personal brand of laptop. But
right, exactly. So there are things that will always be that case, but this ties into what I just think of, like all these interesting shifts in retail. I think that's absolutely going to be one of them. Like there's a place that I used to occasionally go get eggs locally and just on a whim. And now I'm primarily getting them from there, in part because there was a little while where they were hard to get. And that was a place I could just walk up, and now they limited them. You were only allowed to get like one or maybe two or something for that reason. But it is this like knowing where your stuff's coming from is suddenly has like more people care about than used to care about it. And for good reason. So there's like, 'cause there's a heightened reason beyond just supporting local, which is lovely. But I think a lot of people felt detached from that.
Well,
and
and
now
there's
they have a more
third,
solid reason.
I think there's a third path, to your point, a lot of times when you reach the same conclusion from different paths, it shows the permanency or the strength of that destination. The other point is supply chain. I've talked to a number of people about supply chain, and I take certain comfort. I've always joked around that I live in the Kentucky portion of Pennsylvania, but one of the great things is, we've got a neighbor from whom we get eggs. We have a local butcher shop where we get meat. We've got a produce market that has produce from its own orchards that surround the market. And so there's been a lot more relief that we know the supply chain. Now that, of course, doesn't apply to, if you want WD-40 charcoal and duct tape,
Right.
you probably don't have somebody who makes that locally. But at the same time, I do think that, again, an emphasis on small, local, family-owned, part of the community, and supply chain is really something that's going to stick long after we're freed from the safer at home industry.
Well, yes. And like another layer that hasn't existed before because of all of this, I think, is kind of blending the two. Because there are also issues about having 42 stop shopping. Like I don't want to have to go do 12 curb pickups where I have to wait in line. And that's complicated to get my eggs from here and this from here. Now they're not doing curbside pickup where I go get my eggs. That's not the point. But I think what I have seen sort of almost like a blur of the two worlds is like a local restaurant will have their menus available for pickup. And then they will also have like local eggs and local herbs and local this and local that. So they're aggregating multiple local things into one pickup for the week. And I think that's kind of interesting, is that I can get this, it's kind of bringing together the two different pieces.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. You're right. But I think the emphasis on local, and I'll give you another example that has nothing to do with supply chain, and that's banking. I mean, one of my clients and friends, Paula Fargo from Curry Printing, just wrote this op-ed piece, and she was talking about how she, like so many businesses, had applied for PPP funds, and she applied through PNC Bank, and she describes in detail her really frustrating experience with the site crashing, and she couldn't get somebody on the phone, and she tried it 3 times, and she always had to wait, and et cetera. And then apparently she had a banking relationship with a smaller community bank as well. And she went through them out of frustration. She just turned away from PNC. She went through them, and she had everything processed and in within the next day.
Right.
Because she was dealing with somebody, and we all knew that there are large, nameless, faceless organizations, and then you have people who take pride in the community feel. But I think that's gotten heightened to a large extent when banks, for example, had said, well, we're your community bank. I really didn't pay as much attention to that as I do now, because even the gateways to the larger issues, larger problems, and I do think that lending and values and particularly business lending is going to be tightening up. I think the value of understanding the community and being a part of it is going to be heightened the way it hadn't before.
Yeah, I've been thinking lots and lots about how many different kinds of landscapes, business landscapes, will be changing, and definitely more local. It's even more hyper focused than that, though, because our homes, and then I was telling you, I've been thinking about this a lot. And then I saw an ad that was basically saying this morning. I'm like, oh, okay, hello. That our homes are having to meet such a bigger set of needs than it ever has before.
And a different set of needs.
And a different set of needs. Yeah, we didn't all have to work from here. There's 4 of us here. My husband and I didn't both need offices. The kids' bedrooms are kind of set up as their offices. So that was okay. But it's not like we have two offices here at the house, nor would we have ever considered having two offices. And, if we were building this house from scratch, we would have never, ever built
Right. That
two
would be a
offices.
ridiculous floor plan, supposedly.
Ridiculous. I mean, maybe we'd have one shared office, but that wouldn't work. Like I can hear in the distance, my husband's on a Zoom call right now. He couldn't be on the other side of this room chatting while we're on here. So this kind of shift of what kind of space you need, I'm even seeing it outside. Like we don't have a deck because of like this floodplain issue with the county, blah, blah, blah. They won't let us permit for it. So, but our front porch isn't quite big enough to sit out there. And so all of a sudden in this past week or two, I'm like, I am going to make this place a hospitable, go outside and sit, like more of a cozy. And so there's a chair out there and I ordered fabric. I'm going to make a cushion for it because it's a weird size and I can't get like a off the shelf one. And this kind of settling in to reuse space in a different way. And that's going to be not a whole industry, but maybe it is. That was the sort of secondary thought. This morning on Instagram or something, I saw an ad from one of these interior design services where you can just for $99, they'll look at pictures and give you advice or whatever. And the whole ad was based around, we'll help you kind of adaptively reuse a space in your house for what it needs to be now, because it's probably having to be something it was never intended to be. So how do we make that work?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back years ago, the place that was really emphasized was the dining room. We need, and when my parents would look for a house, my mother was really keyed on, let's have the formal dining room because we need that for various things. And then, as we started looking, we knew that we weren't really using the living room and dining room. We were using the den, the family room. And so and I saw a lot of the blueprints when we were looking for a house about 15 years ago, that the answer was to make the living room and dining room smaller. To us, it was still a waste of space, but we'd make it smaller. But now I think that using the home as not just a focus of your ordinary non-work life, but allowing it to serve as a focus of your work life is going to be key. And I think that not only translates to office space, I think obviously the high tech and the smart homes and bandwidth comes into it. I think some soundproofing comes into it.
Oh, yeah.
So that we know, I mean, right now, I don't know.
So I don't have to murder my children when I can hear them fighting right outside my door and I'm on a call.
Well,
like that.
And I've got the lawnmower is going outside and from a neighbor. And so whether it's lawn care or preventing felonies, but either way, you can overhear a lot. So I think that soundproofing is going to be part of it. It's interesting to me how industries are going to dramatically change, and the to use a tired word, pivots that businesses have to make as we emerge from this.
Well, one thing I bet you will start to happen, and I'm already sort of doing it in a MacGyver-y sort of way, but how can you, what are those beds called that tip up?
Murphy beds?
Murphy beds. So not actually a Murphy bed, but my office, if you're watching on video, as you can see, is my bedroom. And it's fine. Like it's not like, we don't exactly have a super Martha Stewart-y house. So it's fine. But, it's all my office stuff is out here in the room. I've been finding ways where some of it can kind of go away when I'm not using it. That's not like right in my line of sight all the time. Even I was telling you, my husband brought home one of the larger monitors from his office because I'm trying to do all these things on a tiny monitor. And that's great, except they block my view. And so I kind of wanted to be able to like be there when I need it and like swing out and not be there when I don't need it. And I think it's going to be really interesting to have adaptive spaces that can be one thing during the day and then something else in the evening.
Well, the greatest example of adaptive spaces that I've seen are boats. If you've been
right. You're like, now I'm a table. Now I'm a bed.
Now I'm a table. This goes down. I can convert here to a bed. Everything is locked away. There are 1,000 different cabinets. They fold out because during the day, you're going to be making lunch for 5 people. And during, at night, you needed to sleep 3 or 4 down there or whatever it is. And so I think that we'll have much more adaptive things as opposed to a strict room. This is labeled the office, so it shall be the office, or this,
and this is yet another layer to all this that I think is really interesting and I'm very happy about, is I think everything has gotten distilled down to what do you really need? Like people liked superstores because before there was so much going on, we were always choosing by convenience. So I want to be able to go one place and get everything.
Right.
And then while you're there, and I'm terrible about this, I'm wandering through Target. I'm like, ooh, an organizing thing. That'll make my life simpler. And I'm like, ooh, a pretty, like that blanket feels soft. And you end up impulse buying all these things that you really don't need. Whereas now I was getting sort of angsty because I feel like we're ordering stuff all the time, like to make the house work, or to, like, I ordered fabric to make that work. And I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, oh no, because we're actually spending way less. It seems like we're ordering all the time, but we're spending way less because we're not going and then buying a bunch of other stuff that
Right.
we didn't really need. And we're not, and to be really clear, like we're not crazy spenders. Like I don't buy all sorts of random things, but it's just the fact that there were random things that you just don't do when, I mean, never did we go to the store and come home with two things. Like, but when we order online, I'm only ordering the two things that I actually needed.
So what you said brought home 2 points to me. The first one is that I think the metric has changed somewhat. That as opposed to being convenience, is it convenient, the big box or whatever? That may not be your metric. Now, in my story, the metric was, is it safe?
Mm-hmm.
Or it may be, does it support the community? Or is it, a shorter supply chain or more reliable or something? So the metric had changed. The other thing, and this was kind of interesting to me because it really tied into our other conversations in previous episodes. Your purchases are now more intentional. Just like the difficulty with Zoom calls as opposed to meeting people in the hallway is that your conversations are more intentional, and that has a good and a bad, as opposed to just the impulse. Hey, can I grab you for a second? Let me bounce this off of you. Or in terms of purchasing, it's, well, those are cute. Or, you run across things that you never really thought you wanted, let alone needed.
Right.
But now you start telling yourself, there really may come a time when I want to make my own 7-grain bread, or I want to make my own whatever.
Which just like, I feel like all of this has the good side and the bad side. Like conversations are more intentional. So we're getting, more focused, and you get the thing done and then you go. There's not as many distractions. So that's great. But you lose out on the unintentional connections of conversations that are so important in the office, especially for culture and just all those kinds of things. And the same with the buying. Like, mostly that was like not necessary buying that, I'm happy that we're not having more clutter in the house. Oh, which is a whole other piece to this. I don't know what's going to happen to the giveaway place, like the Goodwills of the world and whatnot, because everyone I know is massively decluttering, and they've got this huge pile of like stuff I don't need. And which is all, the part of me that has cared about, has truly cared about my impact on the earth and how much, waste and all that stuff, and has always been far more aspirational than I will admittedly sometimes actually weave into my behavior, is super happy that I think whether they're coming at it through that kind of intention or not, a lot more people are now thinking in that way of like, do I really need all this stuff? Do I really care about that? How can I reuse this? I don't, because it's a hassle to go get new things. Like, we've been stripped of convenience, and it's forced us to be more intentional and be more thoughtful. And frankly, it's allowed, for me, and this is just a very personal perspective, there are all sorts of things. Like, I always, like, every time I'd buy eggs from that lady, I'm like, I should always get my eggs here. And then Paul would pick up eggs at the grocery store, so we didn't need eggs, so I didn't go get eggs from her. Well, now I'm almost always getting our eggs from her. And there are times I'd be like, I should bake bread more. Well, now I'm baking bread. Like, I should make the front porch better. Well, now I'm doing that. And I just think there's something, it'll be really interesting to see how then all these other things, shopping patterns and how furniture works. Here's what I'll be hoping for. Dear God, let the computer come out that has the little video. I've been wanting this. I've been begging for this for years. Put the little video camera hole in the center of the computer so that when you're talking to somebody, you're actually looking sort of vaguely near their eyeballs versus, off in some other random direction. It can't be that hard. But I think now, because these video chats are so much more prevalent and so much more important, it may now rise to the occasion of being worth a company making that thing possible.
Well, first of all, ignoring the fact that any IT people listening to this conversation just felt their head explode, I'm sure, especially with it can't be that hard. And
No, it really can't. If it's right there and it's barely visible, it could be in the middle.
I do have a friend that arranged his webcam and certain things on an arm so that he can move the webcam over the face of the person that's speaking, so he appears to be looking right in their eyes. And he showed me the setup, and it's kind of cool, but frankly, it's way more effort than I want to put in.
Well, and actually, I've done things like that, but then you literally can't see the person. And
No,
I want both. Like, I want to be able to read their expressions and their body language and see if their eyes like squinted or sparkled. And
I understand that, but
both.
I think that's kind of, yeah, I won't go down that rabbit hole. I think that's kind of difficult to do, like your Excel spreadsheets, but then there's a camera there. But anyway, but when you were talking about goodwill, I came to that from a different perspective. You were talking about people that goodwill is suddenly oversupply because people are decluttering.
At first, yeah.
I was thinking about that people would be more reluctant to go to Goodwill to buy things or to get things because of the worry about, geez, I don't want to take somebody else's stuff. I don't know where they've been. I don't know if it's safe. I don't know. It's just like, am I going to break quarantine to go over to my neighbor's deck? Yeah, maybe. But am I going to break quarantine to go into a room with a whole bunch of strangers? Probably not. Well, am I going to invite stuff from a stranger's house into my own? I think more people are wary of that, which means that I think there are going to be companies that pop up certifying those places, just like you have certified used cars. People are like, how do I know that this used car is really up to stuff? Well, there's a third party that certifies. And I think there are going to be those places that give ratings that will say this has been certified for these procedures and these policies and sourcing this and all that.
Well, it's not unlike, that's funny. I have never thought about that in terms of products and like items. But, and that's the reason Goodwill won't take like stuffed animals and things like that, because they already had kind of somewhat of awareness of that. We're like, we don't know what's happened to this thing. And if you can't spray it down, then we don't want it. So there's that. But I have thought about, I started the thinking in terms of like restaurants, but then, and also like Airbnb, because they actually do have something kind of sort of like this developing, not really, but it sparked the thought for me of not unlike the way kosher works, where to say this is kosher. I was about ready to explain kosher to my Jewish co-host.
Is that the religious version of mansplaining?
It is. I just Christian-splained it to you. Wow. But for our listeners who maybe don't know how kosher certification works, would you like to fill them in, my Jewish friend?
Well, where I think
I could keep going if you'd like.
Where I think you were going is in order to earn certain accreditations, and you'll see it with the Circle K, let's say it's certified kosher, there you have to have a rabbi go through. And there are certain rabbis that actually, this is their job. It's like a Jewish health inspector. This is their job. And they go through and they make determinations that are important to the laws of kashrut, whether that's separation of milk and meat or what's known as treif, which is, the non-kosher things like pork and byproducts, those sort of things, shellfish.
By the way, as a completely irreverent side note, I always thought the separation of milk and meat was kind of funny since they started off together. So
they did. They started off together, but
I understand. I really do.
But it is a whole weird thing for me, especially somebody who almost got thrown off a Jewish cross-country trip because I was caught with a bacon cheeseburger. But anyway, that was not good. But the point is that I think that you will have these certification, this emphasis on certification, but to emphasize the priority, which here is safety or cleanliness, which equates to the same thing, in these places that otherwise could be seen as a risk, whether it's goodwill.
Right. Well, I mean, think about Airbnb. It makes perfect sense to me that if you were in the same way previously there were super hosts. Well, this is a host who uses an agency, a cleaning. I bet you cleaning companies will be sort of maybe not certified. I'm using that term lightly. I'm not saying there will be like an oversight commission like the rabbis are, but that there will be some sort of standard set where my Airbnb is cleaned by a certified cleaner who is maybe even bonded somehow, that I wipe down all surface, all whatever. I don't know what the thing is, but I think here's what I love about this, and what I think is just so interesting is I think convenience was such a high priority, or such a not even high priority. That's actually my whole point. It wasn't a chosen priority. It was a default position because everything was a blur, and you just never had the time, or it felt like you didn't have the time to slow down and say, I'm only going to care about this right now, because you were trying to care about 20 things at once. And the fact that we're making a list of like, am I deciding by safety? Am I deciding by, amount of effort / convenience? Am I deciding because I want to support my community? Am I deciding, used the word intention before, and it's so much that it's this slowing down and actually choosing, what are my priorities? What do I care about? And how is that going to show up? And that will show up in all of the industries that now come out to the other side of it. And it will be interesting to see what happens with all the like stupid impulse buy stuff, just the like crazy, just completely unnecessary stuff. Will that dwindle off? If nobody's walking through Target or Walmart, how many things will just never even be thought of again, because no one's going to order them offline, because they're just completely, even if somebody sticks them in front of you as you're checking out, not happening. So.
Yeah, I think that people will still walk through, as I know you do, but markedly less. I think what we're seeing is this transformation to more of a life of intention.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I do think that that's where we're going.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
Your stories.
You can find links to that group, as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email, and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.